In this video, I'm going to continue painting the Earth Myrmidon. In the last video, we finished the stone body. In this video, I'm going to be finishing up the armor. I'm also going to be doing the stonework on the base and the stone on his club. What I'm doing is I'm taking Reaper's Master Paint, aged pewter, and right out of the bottle, I'm applying it right onto the black. Now there's a lot of different manufacturers of metal paints, and the metal paints are not all created equally. There's two paints that are lacquer paints that I've used before, which are Mr. Color out of Japan and LCAD out of Europe, which you need turpentine thinner to get rid of. But when you put them on, you can actually buff them, and they get a really nice metallic shine that they look like there's real metal on there, not something you've painted. Because they're so messy to use and hard to clean up, I hardly ever use them, and I rely on the acrylic water-based paints. I really like the Games Workshop metal paints. I think they have a fantastic finish. Right now I don't have any. Mainly my paints are going to be, once again, the Reaper Master Series paints and the Game Color from Vallejo. Now the Vallejo paints, the metallics I like a lot more. It feels like it has a lot more of that flake in there, and they really have that nice metallic finish. The advantage that the Master Paint Series has over here is the Master Paint Series has a wider variety of metallic colors. And this one, aged pewter, I like quite a bit, so I'm using it as a base coat. It's has sort of a mostly metallic feel, but it also feels like paint. Sort of flat and non-metallic. So when we start doing dry brushing and putting our washes and stuff, I'm going to switch from the Reaper paints and go back to the Vallejo Game Color paints. And we're going to get those edges and stuff done with some really nice looking metallics, and this base will look even more metallic than the Reaper Master paints normally do because of the added different paints on top and the washes we're going to be doing. One last note here about this Reaper Master Series metallic colors. The regular colors go on sort of thin, you have to do multiple coats to get a good coverage, but they blend really well. The Reaper's metallics are sort of the opposite, that they're really sort of thick out of the bottle, and you can put them on in one coat, and they have really nice coverage. They still blend really well, and they sort of mix up for glazes really well. So there's a lot of surface on this armor and a lot of edging I have to do. So like in the other movie, instead of you sitting here for a half hour watching me paint all this, I'm just going to speed up the action a little bit. As I'm getting towards the end of this armor, I realize it's a lot of big spaces all the same color. Now I sort of want to add a little bit more spice. The illustration, the armor is all one color, but on here there's all these beautiful panels that have been sculpted. And I'd like to add some contrasting colors in there, another metallic. I think since this is sort of a silvery color, I want to accent it with a little bit of gold. So I'm going to start with a base color of old bronze. Now on top of the old bronze, we're going to be getting some brighter golds in there to really help pop it out. But that's sort of the sort of darkest base color I have in there. So now I'm going to just take these little inset panels and I'm going to take that old bronze and very carefully just fill those in. So wherever there's a recess on the belts, on the tabard, on that big belt buckle, and then on the arm pieces, they have insets too. So I'm going to keep those shapes consistent through the whole model. And it's going to add a little bit of contrasting color and a little bit of visual interest. Now I'm trying to be careful as I'm painting the edges where that base meets the metal rim. Um, I'm not being super careful that I'm agonizing over every sort of little edge there. I'm trying to get as clean as I can, but if it's a little bit sloppy or goes over a little bit, I'm going to be putting some dark washes on that edge that's going to sort of cover up and blend in the silver to the gold transition. So I'm trying to be clean, but not super attentively clean, that I'm spending more time than necessary for parts that are basically going to get covered up with some darker paint. Alright, here comes the part where we're going to take this armor, which looks sort of flat and clean right now, and we're going to really add some life. Now the illustration has sort of a tarnished armor. It looks old. Like the Earth Elemental himself, he's sort of dusty and rusty and dirty. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the Vallejo Game Color Smoky Ink. Now last video you saw me use the Smoky Ink a little bit. In the Vallejo Model Color, it's sort of a similar paint. This one's a little thicker in the Game Color, called Smoke, but it's sort of this. It's the same stuff. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the smoke, I'm watering it down just a little bit, maybe a 3-to-1 mix of smoke to water, so it's still pretty thick on there, and I'm just going to lather it all over this metal. Now the smoke comes out of the bottle looking like motor oil. It's sort of thick, it's got little gritty bits in it, and you think that, oh my god, when I start putting this stuff on, it's going to just cover and it's not going to look good. But it really does, after a coat or two, start looking fantastic, and it really gives an armor a sort of antiqued, tarnished look, which is exactly what I'm going for here. So the idea is to get an even coat over the whole piece. Now it's going to blob up a little bit, and you want a little bit of the wash to go into the cracks and crevices to get them darker, but if it really starts puddling up, just dry off your brush and you could just sort of wick off the extra that you don't want. Also, as the smoke dries on there, all those puddles and stuff are going to sort of shrink down. It's going to blend in beautifully with your undercoat, and it won't quite look as harsh as when it's going on. I also want to make sure that I paint the arm part at the same time so the consistency of the smoke is the same and my application is pretty much the same. And here's the final result with the smoke on there and dried. You could see it really looks like tarnished armor that's sort of been oxidized. It has a really nice base that we can start working on and getting some of that armor back, but still having some of that tarnished areas show through. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking the aged pewter that we did the base coat on it. I'm just doing some dry brushing over it. I'm not getting all the way into the cracks, so I really want that tarnished look to remain in the crevices. But the edges and the top surfaces, I want to be that pewter again. But all the little dips and recesses in there, they're still going to have that nice tarnished look, and it's going to be sort of feathered around the edges. I'll come back in later on with a coat of brighter stuff to clean it up. But basically, I'm sort of covering up some of what I did and leaving a bunch of it to sort of get that really sort of old look to that metal that you can't really get any other way. So it's looking really good, except the Reaper metal just doesn't feel metal enough. We'll be fixing that in a little bit as we start using some of the Vallejo metals on there. That really is going to give it that metallic shine. Now in the sections I painted the old bronze, I'm going to use some Vallejo Model Wash dark green, and I'm going to just get the brass a little bit separated with a contrasting color in there. So I'm carefully just going to just blend it in and just get into those cracks and where the edges meet. Just add a little bit more contrast in the darkness, and to also separate it from the smoky ink that we used on the other armor. Now Vallejo makes a whole series of these washes in a variety of colors. I've got a bunch of them. They're sort of pricey. You can just take Vallejo paints and water them down. They're not going to be the exact same effect because these are really nicely formulated for washes, but you really don't need to spend the extra cash if you're sort of strapped for it. But again, they are a very nice product. Alright, so this is what it looks like with the smoky ink, the dry brush of the pewter, and then the green wash in those bronze bits. Now I've lost some of the bronze color, so I'm just going to take that old bronze again, and just in the center of those areas, I'm just going to strengthen it again. Just a little dry brushing on there to get some of the color back. But along the edges, I still want that sort of dark green, and I want that smoky ink to sort of get that tarnished look in there. So this is how it's looking at this stage. Now comes the point to take that base metal and start brightening it up. I'm going to start with the brass, and I'm going to add some gold on there. So my color of choice here is going to be Game Color, Vallejo Game Color's Glorious Gold. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to dry brush some of that Glorious Gold. I'm not trying to cover it up, but just in the center areas of those plates to give it some more life in the center. I still want the old bronze to show through on the edges. I want that green wash to show through, and I want the smoky ink to show through. So I'm just painting on the center areas. And once again, I'm doing some wet paint and mostly dry brushing it on there because I still want the little dents and indentations to have that bronze in there to get some really nice color modulation. Okay, here's a good look at how that looks with that gold in there. So it still looks like it has lots of grunge and stuff that's been accumulated in the corners, but the center's nice and bright. It looks really nice like crumpled foil. So this is exactly the look I was going for. Now I'm going to take some Vallejo Game Color Silver. I'm going to add just a little bit of highlight to those golds. So wherever there's an edge, like on the plates that edge the face, I'm just going to use the side of the brush near the tip. I'm just going to put a little line of silver to help outline the shape of those. It won't look like the gold has silver paint on it. It'll just like the edges are much hotter looking. And in the plates where there are no edges, I'm just going to put a little stipple here or there of the silver. Just add little sort of shiny highlights. I'm going to make sure that I put them sort of on the high points where the little dips and deterioration happens inside the metal plates. So once again, it's not going to look like there's little dots of silver paint on there. It's actually going to blend into how that gold looks, and it's going to be a cohesive whole. Sorry about the lighting in this section. I forgot to turn on my little side lamp that's brightening up the scene. So what I'm going to do here is on the silver parts of the metal, I'm going to take a little micron pen and I'm just going to outline the transitions for the metal plates overlap. Just add a little black line. Now, in miniature painting, edging helps separate areas and make areas really pop from each other. So if you have a figure wearing a shirt, at the edge of the sleeves you might want to put a little dark line to separate the flesh from the shirt and really help those transitions pop. So that's what I'm doing here. Now in the hobby industry there's tons of specialty markers you could buy if you don't feel like using a paintbrush. Gundam markers are commonly used for this purpose on robots. This is just a micron pen. They're really cheap. This is the smallest one. This is a 01. They come in 01 through 05. This is the finest line. And you can get them just at any stationery store or even drugstores. They're real common and they work really well for this. Once they dry, they're waterproof and they're fantastic. And this is what it looks like with that little dark line in place, separating the bronze from the silver and then separating the silver plates where they overlap each other. Now, just like I painted that gold, that glorious gold over that old bronze, I'm going to be taking that Vallejo Game Color Silver that we just used to do the little dappling and the edging, and I'm going to do the same process I did with the glorious gold except on the silver bits here, to really sort of brighten them up. So I'm actually concentrating just on the edges. I'm trying not to get into those little dips. I want to leave those sort of dirty. So I'm doing the large flat areas. Now I'm trying to pay attention that light's going to fall from the top. So as we get down towards the armor that sort of curves under, I want to leave it dirty. And also the edges, the sort of ridges that are on those metal plates, I want to paint those brighter silver. Now on those overlapping plates, I want to leave the lower areas near the recesses tarnished, but the ridges that are on the edges, I want to make sure that they're bright silver. And once again, I'm going to pay attention to sort of how the light's falling. So as we get down towards the belt and underneath the belt area and underneath the tabard area, I'm going to just leave those tarnished and not put that much silver there. All right, I'm going to add just a little bit more pop to the armor on the undersides. So I'm going to use some Vallejo Game Color Black Glaze. I'm going to water it down pretty much, so it's probably going to be a 4-to-1 mix with 80% water and then 20% the black glaze. And just in the underparts, like on the pecs over there and some of the undercut areas, I'm just going to put a little glaze of black just to get it a little deeper. Now, some of this is the same area that I did the pin lining on, and that's fine. This is just going to reinforce that pin lining, and it's going to actually blend the edges of the pin a little bit more and make it look like dark recesses. Make it really look like those plates are overlapping. Now I'm going to put another coat of that Vallejo Game Color Silver on, but this time I'm just going to concentrate on the very edges and just sort of clean up any wash that might have gotten there. And also those ridges on the plates on his ribs over there, I'm just going to really get some strong silver color in there. Now at this stage, after this is done, that's really going to start helping make it look like a metal object. It's going to have nice transitions from the really shiny bits right into the recesses that look tarnished. I'm going to put one final highlight onto this, but I'm going to let you watch this first. So even at fast speed, that went on quite a bit. So I'm going to let you have a nice look at what this looks like with that second highlight on. Now you can see the metal's looking really shiny and like metal that has its edges rubbed but still is tarnished in the center. And of course I do the same process to that arm piece. I'm going to try to remember sort of how the arm fits on and make sure that I get light directional going a little bit on there so the top surface there is a little bit brighter. Since the recesses have that inky smoke in them, they have sort of a warm tone, and the silver is sort of neutral. So what I want to do is I want to cool off those edges just a little bit to help add some contrast. So I'm taking Vallejo model color, sky blue, and I'm going to make a glaze out of it, more like a wash. So I'm going to take a lot of water in there. It's going to be mostly water with just a little bit of pigment. And then just on the edges, I'm adding just a slight hint of blue. And it's really going to add just a little bit more contrast where it gets into the crevices and it's that sort of dirty, rusty color. Alright, I know there's lots of steps in weathering this armor, and we're getting closer. So I'm taking some white Vallejo model color, and I'm taking the silver. I'm going to mix it, probably a 60-40 mix, 60% white, 40% silver. I'm just going to take the brush and just on the very, very edges, wherever there's an edge sticking up, I'm just going to use the side of a loaded brush. I'm just going to paint a little silvery white line to help that edge really pop. Now, looking at the illustration again that the model is based on, there's some rust in there. It's not quite big patches of sort of rough rust, but just little bits of rust in the corners. So I'm going to go back to Vallejo model washes and I'm going to use the rust wash. And just in the crevices, I'm just going to put a wash of the wash to get some of that sort of subdued rust in the corners. Alright, so with that rust dry, this is how it looks. I did go back in with my micron marker and just sort of touch up the edges because the rust covered over those black edges. I just wanted to get them a little bit sharper again. So at this point, I feel the armor is finished. When I get everything put together, I might go back and just do some touch-ups or add a little bit of highlight. I also think at this point, I can glue that arm on. So I'm going to take off the sticky tack. Okay, and you can see in the areas where the sticky tack is coming off that the piece is the raw resin. It doesn't have any primer on it. It's just that raw gray resin. I'm going to just clip off the paper clip, make sure all that sticky poster tack is off, and then I'm going to use some of the super glue with the little rubber particles in it, and I'm going to glue it in place. I got to make sure I take off the sticky tack in there and do a little test fitting, and it looks really good. So I think I'm just going to glue it, and we're done with this section. I'm going to head on to the base. So like everything else in this model, the base is going to have a lot of layered color. I'm going to be using Reaper's Stone Gray and Shadowed Stone and Vallejo's Stone Wall Gray as the three base colors. So due to some camera malfunctions, you don't actually get to see me paint it. But the base was painted pretty much dry brushed on there with Shadowed Stone, very much like it did to the legs with the oranges. And then I dry brushed on top of that the stone gray. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking those Vallejo washes, I'm just taking a variety of them. I'm taking some browns, I'm taking that rust one, I'm taking some green, and I'm just dabbling them on there. So what I'm doing is I'm adding a lot of little local color. The ground is eventually going to be dirt, but I want to have a rock base under it. And I want to have all these sort of nature colors just sort of peeking through, sort of dirt and grime and stuff that's gone there. Now they look a little bit bright here, but once they dry, they're going to blend right into that gray. And it's going to be sort of this mottled gray color that you're not quite sure how, when people look at it, how you got to it. But it's going to look really nice. So this is how the base looks with all the washes in place. I'm just going to take a little bit of the Reaper stone gray, I'm just going to do a little bit of light dry brushing to blend in all those washes with the stone gray. Now those washes again have sort of a gloss finish, so things are going to look shiny for a while. When we get towards the end of the project, we're going to spray a dull coat over the whole thing. So all those little shiny areas and those places that are shiny next to places that are flat are all going to even out flat, and it's all going to look really nice. And the base is done for now. So I'm going to do the same treatment on the big rock at the end of his club. He's holding a tree stump that still has its roots wrapped around a giant rock. So I'm using the same colors I used for the gray on the base, and I'm pretty much doing the same process on that rock. Alright, now it's back to the base. Now I'm going to use that Vallejo Game Color Stonewall Gray I had out earlier. I'm just going to pick out the very highest highlights. I don't really want to paint over that much with the dry brush, but I just want to pick out little bits and pieces here just to help accentuate the forms. Now I am going to put a highlight on top of this, just like we did with the metal with the white, just on the edges, but this is sort of the penultimate highlighting stage. And the same thing with the stone and the club. Once again, the Stonewall Gray and just the highlights. Okay, here we go. Last highlight. I'm going to be using Vallejo Game Color Bone White. And very much like that little edging we did on the armor with the white and silver mix, I'm just going to do the very sort of little edgy tip of the rock. Just where they're sort of worn through, so we get a nice little highlight there. So because I can't leave well enough alone, I'm going to put a little bit of that smoky ink, pretty dilute, on there just to get a little more of the browns, to get more of the tarnish in the armor and the legs to sort of matching with the base. Once again, this is going a little dark. When it dries, it's going to dry a lot more transparent, and it'll be very subtle, and it's going to blend pretty much everything that's gone together a little bit nicer on there. Alright, everything's still all wet. You can see some puddles and stuff in there pulling. But this is what the base looks like. And you can see there's a lot of sort of varied color in there. Even though it predominantly looks gray, you can still piece out little pieces of varied color in there. Okay, here it is all dried up. And we have one last task in this movie. Now the dry brushing and stuff has spilled over onto that black base. And I want to keep that black base really nice and clean. So I'm just going to use a Vallejo black. And I'm painting over all the little dry brush and gobbledygook that got on that base, so we have a nice clean back base. I'm being very careful on that top rim to make sure there's a nice clean edge. And that's going to be it for this video. In the next video, we're going to take the Earth Myrmidon and finish him up. That means doing the vines, doing sort of the flocking on the base, giving some last highlights to the stonework, and adding a glow and a gemstone. See you next time.